You probably had a cup this morning, but there was a time when drinking coffee could get you killed. In the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Murad IV reportedly had offenders sewn into sacks and thrown into the Bosphorus. Before him, clerics in Mecca condemned the drink as sinful and banned it outright. Rulers across 3 continents tried to destroy a single beverage. The real question is what made it so dangerous? The botanical trail starts in the montane forests of the Ethiopian highlands, where Coffea arabica grew wild for centuries. Popular history often credits a 9th century goat herder named Kaldi, who supposedly noticed his flock frolicking after eating red berries. But this story belongs entirely to folklore. It is absent from medieval records, only appearing in print in 1671, written down by a Maronite professor in Rome named Antoine Faustus Nyron, centuries after the fact. The actual history begins in the mid-15th century, across the Red Sea in the highlands of Yemen. Here, the first documented brewing occurred. Sufi monks of the Shadili order discovered that roasting the seeds and boiling them in water created a liquid that banished sleep. These mystics used the dark brew as a tool for devotion, drinking it to sustain concentration during long nocturnal prayer rituals. During this early period, coffee remained a localized physical aid, prized by monks who wanted to sharpen their minds and chase away sleep during their devotions. But the secular world was watching. By the early 16th century, the dark brew escaped the quiet Sufi lodges. It flowed along trade routes into the bustling urban centers of Cairo, Damascus, and Mecca, and eventually to the heart of the Ottoman Empire in Istanbul. In 1555, during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, the first official coffeehouse opened its doors in the imperial capital. This storefront marked the birth of an entirely new social institution, the kahvehane. Within a few decades, Istanbul alone hosted hundreds of these establishments. For the first time, the rigid hierarchies of the early modern world began to crack. Inside these rooms, a wealthy merchant, a humble craftsman, a scholar, and a low-ranking soldier sat side by side at the same wooden tables. They paid a single coin for a hot cup, and with that purchase, they bought access to an unprecedented public forum. Men gathered to play chess, listen to traveling storytellers, and trade the latest political gossip. Before the coffeehouse, public gatherings were highly regulated, restricted to the mosque or the marketplace. Now, a secular, unstructured space existed outside the control of the palace. The real danger lay in the conversation the liquid fueled. It sharpened minds, kept patrons awake, and democratized information. In these warm, crowded rooms, the elite saw the seeds of a new and unpredictable threat to public order. The authorities watched this sudden explosion of shared public spaces with growing alarm, realizing that the rulers who feared coffee were about to be proven right. In 1511, the holy city of Mecca became the first major site of official coffee suppression. The Mamluk governor, Khair Beg, ordered the drink restricted and shut down the city's public gathering spaces. To the ruling class, this dark, bitter liquid was a direct threat to the social order. Clerical critics framed the drink as intoxicating and sinful, comparing its stimulating effects to wine. Its novelty, dark color, and alerting properties fed their suspicions. They argued that coffeehouses resembled taverns, encouraging patrons to pawn their possessions, gamble, and ignore their religious duties. Soon, the phrase "the devil's drink" entered the local lexicon, a powerful theological condemnation used by the state to brand the brew as an abomination. The Panic of 1511 established the first official paper trail of control, transforming a quiet devotional aid into an outlawed substance as concern hardened into formal control by both pulpit and state. This state-level hostility reached its peak in the 17th century under the Ottoman Sultan Murad IV. Ruling with absolute authority, Murad saw the crowded coffee houses of Istanbul not as places of leisure, but as breeding grounds for sedition. He responded with systematic violence. According to contemporary reports, a first offense was met with immediate public beatings. For those who refused to abandon the habit, the penalties escalated. Later chronicles record that repeat offenders faced execution. The most notorious accounts describe condemned drinkers being sewn into heavy leather sacks and cast directly into the Bosphorus. While modern historians treat these specific execution methods with caution, viewing them as dramatic stories tied to Murad's moral policing rather than universally verified facts, the underlying reality was undisputed. Whether an offender faced a wooden cudgel or the cold sea, the threat from the palace was absolute. Under Murad's reign, the simple act of drinking coffee had officially become a capital offense. By the mid-17th century, coffee had arrived in Venice, Paris, and London, and with the beans came the exact same political panic. On December 29, 1675, King Charles II of England issued a royal proclamation ordering the immediate closure of all coffee houses. The English crown branded these rooms as seminaries of sedition, where idle and disaffected persons spread false, malicious, and scandalous reports to defame the government. European monarchs realized what Ottoman sultans already knew. A room full of alert, talking people was a threat to absolute power. But unlike in Istanbul, the English public refused to submit. A massive backlash from merchants and citizens threatened the stability of the kingdom. In an embarrassing reversal, Charles II was forced to completely withdraw the order by February 1676, just weeks after signing it. The bitter brew had won its first major battle against a European king, proving that the panic around coffee was now a global contagion. For the cost of a single penny, any commoner could sit at a table, read the daily news, and debate scholars. This cheap access to knowledge earned these spaces a nickname: penny universities. In a tavern, alcohol dulled the senses and kept the working class quiet. But coffee did the opposite. It kept patrons sober, sharp, and highly critical. The real threat to absolute rulers was not the bitter brew itself, but the sober network of information it fueled. By making intellectual debate affordable to anyone, coffeehouses changed who had the power to participate in public speech. In London, the casual talk inside these rooms hardened into the global infrastructure of modern capitalism. In 1688, Edward Lloyd opened a Tower Street coffeehouse where merchants and ship captains traded maritime intelligence. This daily exchange of shipping risk formalized into Lloyd's of London, the world's premier insurance market. Nearby an exchange alley, Jonathan's Coffeehouse became a hub for expelled brokers. By 1698, John Castaigne was posting stock rates on the walls, laying the groundwork for the London Stock Exchange. Even the Royal Society circulated gravity and physics equations over coffee. The simple act of drinking became the bedrock of global science and finance. Across the English Channel, the French capital turned coffee's intellectual spark into an explosive force. By July 1789, the cafes surrounding the Palais Royal had become operational bases for political agitators. On July 12th, following the dismissal of Finance Minister Jacques Necker, journalist Camille Desmoulins stepped forward. He surged out of the Café de Foix, leaped onto a table, and brandished a pistol. Shouting, "To arms, citizens!" Desmoulins mobilized a crowd of thousands. 2 days later, this coffeehouse crowd stormed the Bastille, igniting the French Revolution. The absolute monarchs who spent centuries trying to outlaw the dark brew were proven right. A sober public, gathered over coffee, was a direct threat to the old order. Today we take our morning cup for granted, but those ancient rulers were right about one thing. Coffee fuels free thought. In an age of digital echo chambers, we may desperately need those volatile physical spaces again. Join the conversation in the comments.